Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to a special episode of Topline Spotlight. Topline Spotlight is a small segment of the Topline Podcast released on Thursdays, and each episode features a one-on-one interview between a guest and one of our hosts. This time, it's me. And our focus is on understanding a background, a business problem that one of our guests has solved over the last 12 to 24 months. We like to bring in high-profile GTM leaders, CEOs, founders, and investors, and today we're lucky to have on the show Nick Turner. Nick's been in commercial leadership in the MarTech space for nearly 20 years, helping to scale software companies from seed and Series A up to $75 million in revenue. And he recently took on the CEO role at Dreamdata, where they just raised a $55 million Series B to help marketers own their GTM. You know Dreamdata because we've been talking about them. They've been a sponsor on the show for the last couple of months, and we're huge fans. So Nick, it's great to have you on Topline Spotlight. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We're excited to have you. So we want to dive into a business problem or challenge that you've solved over the last 1 to 2 years. But before we do that, we do want to focus on your baseball card and figure out exactly who you are. So you are the CEO, but you actually joined Dreamdata as the Chief Revenue Officer, if I'm not mistaken. For those that aren't familiar, what is Dreamdata? Give us a little bit of background on what the company is and does.
Yeah, for sure. So Dreamdata, founded in 2018. A couple of guys out of Trustpilot, if you're familiar with Trustpilot, they had the problem of figuring out, hey, where are we actually producing our leads, marketing measurement, marketing attribution, specifically for B2B. And so if you know Trustpilot, they had a really great kind of, PLG motion. They had outbound, they had inbound. They tried to figure out what was working. And so that's what we do. We help marketers, specifically B2B marketers, understand, what's working and what's not working, take on the reporting of that, and actually take action against it. So it's one thing to measure what's working and what's not. It's another to be able to take great action against it. So that's what we do.
How old is the company? Where is it based? Tell us a little bit about the origin story.
We're 7 years old now, and I joined almost 2 years ago, like you said, as CRO with the intention of making the jump to CEO if everything had gone well. So it's actually a Danish company. I was the first U.S. hire. We're based in Copenhagen. We've got about 50 people right now, and we've got about 15 in US. So obviously, US is a big growth market for us. So we've scaled the team up pretty quickly, and we'll probably double the size of the team in the US over the next 12 months as well.
Oh wow, that's incredible. And so the space is kind of how would you characterize the category that you operate in?
Yeah, marketing measurement, attribution, and activation. That's our space. Yeah,
cool, awesome. And before we dive into the business challenge, which you may cover, but talk us through the journey of becoming a CEO. I think this is your first time as a CEO, if I'm not mistaken. So, walk us through that evolution, because it's inspiring for all the GTM operators out there that are listening, knowing that they can make the leap to the big job one day.
Yeah, no, I would say it was. Everyone says it's humbling. It is humbling. And I think I had done go-to-market for nearly 20 years, as you mentioned, and I really wanted the opportunity to learn more about the rest of the way the business is run. And so I was obviously had strengths. I grew up in sales, so I had a lot of strengths from sales. I had marketing under my belt before, so I had some strengths there. Post-sales, of course, I think every CRO typically, at a minimum, you're owning sales and post-sales if you've got a CRO title. But then kind of making the jump, I think a lot to learn. I'm still only 6 months in. Now almost 9. It's going quick, I guess. And at the same time, as soon as I took the role, we decided to go to market and do a fundraise. And
wow.
So I haven't had I don't know if there's any typical kind of way that you get into a CEO role and it starts for you, but I would say we jumped into a fundraise, and then we completed that in early October. We did an offsite to kind of we're going to grow as I mentioned, and we wanted to make sure that we had all our values aligned as a team, and so jumping into that and then kind of jumping into finishing up Q4 strong. I kind of feel like I'm still wearing the CRO hat as well. So I'm just getting my feet wet still. But it's very exciting. I'm very fortunate to have a great board, a great leadership team that works with me, and a great team overall that makes it for my weaknesses and helps me to learn. I think that's one of the key things is, we have my weaknesses, I'd say finance and tech, absolutely, tech and product. And having two leaders in those seats, Peter and James, of course, everyone across the board, but I would say in particular, what I felt I really needed was somebody in that seat that was very strong, but also willing to help me learn as I tried to figure out how to help them in their roles. So
That's great. I mean, and what was it like navigating a fundraising process as a newly minted CEO, and then you landed the plane on that? You raised $55 million, which is incredible. What was that experience like?
yeah, it was. I don't know how to describe it. I think I've been involved in fundraisers before, but it's really quite different when you're the one owning it and running it. I've supported other CEOs and talked to investors. And I think what made it even more I guess I'll just say disheartening, like really the market right now. I mean, look, we're founded in 2018. I can't go out there and say we're an AI native company. Everyone's been called bullshit.
Right.
You can't do that. But right now, everybody wants AI, and so I think that definitely influenced how we went to market and who we thought about talking to. We talked to 73 investors over the course of 6 weeks, something like that. Went deep with some, not with others. Of course, like that's just how it works. I think, if you're in sales, you know that, hey, in a good quarter, you're going to close 25% of your deals, right? Conversion, like that's a decent conversion rate. And the fundraise, if you close one of 73, you've done a great job. And that is, it's
especially if one has $55 million.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, we were fortunate to find great partners in Peaks Fan. I think we were also fortunate that we were, I think, the third investment out of the new fund that they had raised in earlier this year. I forget the exact timing. So they had just raised $833 million to invest, and I think they were just a great choice for us because they focus on MarTech. A lot of investors will shy away from it. I've been in it my entire career. I think there's still a lot of opportunity there. I mean, there was 18,000 companies, so there's lots of opportunities. But trying to sort yourself out in that mess is what's critical to do if you're gonna do well in MarTech. But I heard a lot of obviously, what's your AI strategy? How are you guys approaching that? And I think AI for us, we've been cautiously optimistic. I mean, it's I've been through several markets like this. I was in college when the internet was just taking off, and I was about to graduate when it started to crash, thinking, what am I going to do now? Because I had based my whole my degree on e-commerce, basically. And so you graduate, and then everything obviously turns out fine. It feels like maybe AI is in that same time right now. A ton of hype. I think we're past the peak, and now I'm with the whole trough of disillusionment. We'll see how that goes. But what I did hear a lot of investors talk about was, hey, there's two things happening, and I don't know that they would say this out loud in public, but two things happening. We're concerned about the durability of revenue in AI, because you look at, I should not name any names, but companies that have gotten to 100 million or 200 million in under a year, they've not been through a full renewal cycle. So is that budget coming from innovation? Is it coming from a line item? So basically, how do you secure a budget line item as an AI company? And right now, is it just coming from the innovation budget? So they had that kind of concern, but they also, they're VCs, so they can't stay away from a company that's growing that quickly to 200 million plus. Right. It's just not, they wouldn't be doing their job if they did that. But on the other hand, they were thinking, I'm a firm believer in what you talk about. Having been through, again, the internet, the 2008 downturn, the last couple of years, profitable, efficient growth is core for us. And I think when I joined, we were 50 people. We will have grown revenue by 3x, and we're still 50 people. And so I think getting our burn multiple down, things like that were really important to us. So we focused on those metrics. We focused on retention, and that also informed kind of who you're going to end up with, because I didn't want to end up with an investor that said, "Hey, in 2026, we need to see 5x growth." I was like, "Well, we just did 2.5x. When you get bigger, it's not going to accelerate. It doesn't usually. We actually did accelerate our growth some, but you're not going to say, okay, we're growing at 2.5x at 10 million or whatever, and now we're going to grow 5x. That's never going to happen." And so I think we wanted a partner that had good realistic expectations as to what our growth would be. So all of those things were super interesting to go through. And again, I will say I was just fortunate to have a great board, to have a great team to guide me through that, given it was my first time.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And Peakspan is a great firm, and really in the same vein as our my investor, Elephant Ventures. Elephant, Radian, Peakspan. They're all kind of like quasi venture, quasi growth equity, but focused on investing in profitable businesses that are growing quickly, which is great. The premise of Spotlight is a business challenge that you've tackled over the last 1 to 2 years, and certainly to your point about meeting with investors, I think AI is top of the heap, right, for all of us. So walk us through what was the challenge that you specifically navigated in the shift to AI for Dreamdata, how you accomplished it, what you encountered, and sort of what happened as a consequence.
Yeah. I would say we're in the middle of it. I don't know that I've accomplished it, but I would say that we're making good progress towards it, and we're proud of what we're doing. Our business is around measurement and attribution, which means complex data models, complex numbers, and the fact is there's still, when we look at that and we think about putting that in front of our customers, we want to make sure that the CMO or VP of marketing or demand generation person, they're going to take our numbers, they're going to give them to the board or to the C-suite and say, this is how we're performing. And we need to make sure that they're credible. And so we approach that very carefully to make sure that if we're going to insert AI and have it run around on top of our data model, it's going to make our customers look good, at least look accurate, give them good, accurate data that they can make decisions on. And so I've seen teams wiped out utilizing generative AI on top of these complex models completely because they made mistakes by just trusting what the bot was saying. So we've been very careful about how we approach that. We're working on releasing a few new items in the coming year, in the upcoming new year, I should say. That's very exciting. And we think we've solved a lot of the problems around, there's really two things that we think about. There's obviously the hallucination side, lots of progress made on that front from the large language models and in our product as well. But then there's also the problem with people that aren't educated well enough to prompt properly. And so how do you make sure that you don't give the right answer to the wrong question? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If somebody asks a question expecting an answer and they get a right answer, but they get the right answer to a different question. And so those are the two things that I think you have to be very careful with. If you have a product that is focused heavily on, large amounts of data, numbers, calculations, make sure that you're actually you're giving accurate answers to your customers, because like I was saying before, at the end of the day, and we're not victims. We've done this as well. Everyone is putting AI in front of the name of their product right now, and that's just not a good idea for marketing. You're not selling the benefit. You're just saying AI accounting or AI marketing attribution. You need to actually provide value to the customer. And the way that we do that is that we provide accurate information and data to them when they're trying to make decisions on where they should spend their marketing dollars.
Yeah, I think to your point about prompting, I think that's part of the trough of disillusionment potentially, which is, I think, the premise of Gen AI. We were talking to Kyle Poyar on our main show recently, and he was saying, this interface where you're supposed to know what to do is pretty novel when it comes to technology, because I think that's the role of product, right? The role of product is not to leave a blank canvas up to your user and say, ask it anything, but to say, I'm leveraging the technology in ways that you may not even see, but these are the ways that you use the product and click this button to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And so I think that, there needs to be more education on that front still, and how people know how to use that as a product.
So what do you all, so the product enhancements are really like layering in Gen AI to make it natural language based, but still make sure that you're deploying and providing the right information and accuracy. And then also probably using templates and coaching to make sure that the user gets the right answer to the right question as opposed to the right answer to the wrong question. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah. And, Salesforce, I don't know if they published a study, but there was a study done over the summer on Agentforce where they were saying that agents were failing like 40 to 70% of the time. And that is not a place where we can be. And I think that is, that's a roulette table. It's not software. And so you have to make sure that you're actually, it works well. But, the way that we, effectively, people want to be able to chat with their data and get correct answers. The problem is that on the other hand, of the other side of that is, they answer confidently. Like there's no like gray area. It's like, this is the right answer. We name all these things, like we give a lot of bots like female names. They should be male names because they just tend to mansplain and, and just think they're correct every single time. And so we have to think about how we're naming these bots in that regard. But seriously, I think you do have to make sure that when somebody comes into your product, especially our product, that we are giving accurate answers. And so that involves like I said, product is my weak spot, so I'm not going to try to explain the intricate details of it. But it involves a semantic layer to make sure that the agent
private question and stop it before it provides a numerical response, maybe
correct.
Structured into a query into the database that gives you actual response.
Exactly right. And then the other side of that, to make sure that someone that doesn't know how to prompt understands what they're getting, you take the SQL statement that you're using to query the database, and then you show it to them in a format that they can understand. Because I cannot, 25 years ago, I did learn how to use SQL. I couldn't do it now. And so you put it in a format to where someone can look at it and say, okay, this is what I was asking for, and this answer makes sense to me. So it can't just be a black box of hey, here's a text question, here's a text answer. You need to know how it actually came up with the answer, and then present it in a way that's attractive to you or to your stakeholders.
That makes sense. Tell me about your outlook for 2026. What are you most excited about? And how is Dreamdata approaching the new year? Because to your point, maybe we're past the peak of AI hype. You probably, you need AI in your product because you need the same way you need, other basic web applications in your product. But how are you thinking about differentiation as you look ahead to, whether it's 3x, 4x, 2x, whatever the growth rate is, looking to continue to grow profitably into next year?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely excited about our product development. That's the number one thing that we've focused on. We've been watching the market and seeing how people have developed till now, and just been patient. Because one of the other things that you have to realize is that everyone is working on building their own agent, but Google, OpenAI, all of the major LLMs are trying to make it really easy for you to build an agent, so you can spend a ton of resources just doing all of that work yourself, or you can be patient and wait for them to make it a lot easier for you. They're spending billions in dollars that we don't have. Look, 55 million is a ton of money, but it is not $4 billion or $8 billion to do this. And so there are companies working incredibly fast on trying to get that ready for the market in general. And, we'll focus on the application layer versus any infrastructure or kind of platform play. So,
do you think large enterprises are gonna build their own agents? You think that, I don't know, some big Honeywell or Marsh & McLennan are gonna spend a lot of time developing their own internal software agents? Or do you think it's still gonna be the way that it's been for the last 40 or 50 years, which is they're going to use companies like Dreamdata for specific product use cases because you have technical and domain expertise and you've built the product to interact with the end user? What do you think?
I do think it can be a little bit of a nightmare if you have a company like Honeywell I don't know, maybe 10,000, 15,000 employees. Each one of those employees might be able to develop their own agent that they use independently. Is it getting the same answer as their colleague? Are they getting the right information? And just from a business standpoint, let's set aside AI and just think about innovation and business in general. I think it's important that people focus on their core competencies and they're efficient on that front. So I think there is a lot of talk about everyone's just going to build their own agent or their own software. Maybe some of that happens, but we've been talking about low code, no code for years, and that hasn't really taken off in large enterprises. They still go to external people that have a core competency to build this stuff. So I do think it comes back to just, general best practices of this is our core competency. We do X. This other company can do Y, much cheaper, much better than we can. And that will drive it.
I agree with you. You could probably tell by the way I was asking that question, but
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is a short show. We're almost at the end of our time together. Nick, if you wanted to pay it forward a little bit, thinking about books, podcasts, people, investors, mentors, things that have had a big impact on you that you think we should know about, give us some inspiration.
Yeah, I have a non-standard one. And I actually talked to Kevin Dorsey about it recently. He mentioned that he had read it, and I was so surprised because I'd never met anybody else in tech that had read this book. It's called the E-Myth, if you're familiar with it. It's from like late 80s, early 90s. I would recommend it. It's how I thought about building process and operationalizing a company. The premise is it's just called the E-Myth. There's those multiple versions of it. But the idea is if you're professional services, say like a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, anything like that, you have to decide, do you want to work on your business or do you want to work in your business? And it talks about effectively kind of building out a franchise. How do you systemize your business in a way that you can step back from it and just work on building the business as opposed to being inside of it? So I really like that book. I read it once upon a time. I owned a construction company. That's another day. And I read it to help build that. And I used the same principles from the E-Myth to work on, how do I build process at a tech company?
I'm on Amazon right now, and it's trying to sell me the E-Myth Revisited, but I can't find the original. Maybe I just got to do the revisited version.
There's probably not a whole lot difference, to be honest. They added a couple pages or added a preface by somebody that was more recognizable now as opposed to in 1990. But no, I really like that book. I'll just call that out as one because I hate giving lists because people don't know where to focus. But that is one that I think is pretty unique. And if you're newer in the space, I mean, maybe I'm dating myself now, but Crossing the Chasm is just always a great reference as well.
Yeah, it's a great one.
It's for go-to-market folks. I think understanding Crossing the Chasm is really important.
Agreed. Nick, if folks want to learn more about Dreamdata, maybe they're having attribution issues. Maybe they need accuracy. They don't need the 70% of failing agents sold to them by Mark Benioff. What's the best way to get in touch with you? What's the best way to inquire more or learn more about how people can get more insights on how they're spending ad dollars so that they can drive better performance?
Yeah, so obviously our website, dreamdata.io. I like to talk to marketers one-on-one. I set aside 2 hours a day to do that. If you find me on LinkedIn, I've got a Calendly link on my profile. Book time there. We'll chat one-on-one. I really like doing that. So feel free to do that. Or if you want, and I won't sell you. If you go to dreamdata.io and you do a demo request, the sales team will sell you. And just so you know that will happen.
Great. Nick, thanks so much for being our guest on the show. Congrats on the promotion to CEO. Congrats on the fundraise, on being a great Pavilion member, which we appreciate, and your support of the show. And we're excited for an incredible 2026 for Dreamdata.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Okay, and against all odds, you're still here. Look, if you want more Topline, check out the Topline newsletter at topline.beehive.com. Beehive is spelled weird. It is BEEHIIV.com, topline.beehive.com. Or if you're a video person, because video is great, check us out on YouTube. Topline-media is what you want. Have a delightful day, everybody.